Hello! Something that's crazy for me to think about is I sort of entered the furry community back in 2008, 2009, and I was 11 years old. I actually just recently passed my 12-year anniversary of being on YouTube, which is from January 23rd, 2009. And just yesterday, I passed my 12-year anniversary for being on Furaffinity. And to tell the truth, I haven't been active in the furry community like that whole time. When I got into it, I really fell in love with fursuiting and seeing people go to parks in public and just like make people's days brighter. When I started going into like high school and college, it's something that was there, but I didn't actually go to a furry convention until 4 years ago at FWA 2017. So it's a little weird. I haven't been in it the whole time, but I kind of was in it, took a break, and then came back. It's changed a lot. The types of websites we use have changed. The popularity of it, the public view of it has all been kind of different. And part of that's because the world's been different. So today I have a very special guest with me, Mr. Ike the Reindeer, and he's gonna go ahead and talk to us about some of the things that we both remember from back in the day that have changed versus now. Hi everyone, I'm Ike, and I'm a deer. One of the first things that I remember from back in the olden days of the furry community was the kinds of websites you would visit to even look at any kind of furry content. If you wanted to look at furry artwork back in like 2008 or 2009, you would probably just be going on Furaffinity or DeviantArt, which are still there today, but I feel like Instagram and Twitter have kind of taken over as far as like picture-based things that you can look at art on. On a similar note, furry YouTube wasn't nearly as developed as it is now. Most of the videos you would find from back then were like just people walking around in fursuit, which I always loved. And then you would also see stuff from like Anthrocon and other conventions. Those are still big back then, the fursuit parades and dance parties and stuff like that. Some of the older videos from like 2007 plus or minus a few years are honestly still some of my favorites. Because things weren't so global yet, there was a lot of really unique content like the Furry Paw Pet show, and I definitely felt like you had to do a lot more digging back then to find any kind of furry content, but that's kind of what made it fun. Another thing you would have found about 12 years ago is a lot of blogs. And specifically, I felt like I saw so many people that had a live journal linked in their Furaffinity profiles, and I don't think I see anybody using LiveJournal anymore. I think it's just easier to keep up with people nowadays on Instagram, and if you have them on Snapchat and Twitter, like you just don't need a big long thing for your whole life. There's a few other things that are kind of like lumped into a similar category, which is the size, popularity, and public opinion of furries. Even just about 10 years ago, I don't think it was nearly as like globalized and popular as it is today. It seemed like a much smaller group of people. Not that everyone today is a furry by any means. And I think the age that people became furries was like a little bit later in life than they do now. I remember when Vine became big, I started seeing furry content on there and being really surprised. And even more surprising that there was like a decent amount of people enjoying furry content on Vine. And a lot of those creators ended up moving over to YouTube or just starting on YouTube. And so now we see a lot more popular YouTubers, and it's kind of like a lot more in the public eye, which I think for the most part has been a really beneficial thing for furries as a whole. When it comes to like the negative stereotypes that people used to associate with furries and what they do now, I feel like now there's less of like a stereotype thing and people are just like, well, they're just a little weird maybe, and that's kind of where it ends. But back then there was like this CSI episode that I felt like everybody was still talking about like 4 years after it came out. That's like all they thought furries were, was like these crazy, whatever, like gropey animals, and that's like the only thing that it was. But I think with the advent of the internet, not only because it's become more popular, but people from all around the world are just so much more connected. And just in general, people today are like less likely to be so judgmental of people for things that they like. I like seeing that people that aren't in it are generally really accepting of it. I even feel like depending on where you work, you could tell your coworkers that you're a furry or something even close to that. If they're like relatively mature adults, like they're probably just gonna be like, okay, that's cool. And that'll be it. That's not going to be like some weird conversation. And I'm sure that still happens, but with everybody that I've talked to about it, they're like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then that's kind of it, which is kind of nice. And so it's even easier today to get a good start into the community and start figuring out how you can do something you really enjoy with other people. So both people and technology have just kind of changed, and as a result, the furry community has changed with it. And I think it's starting to become a really beautiful thing now. And we'll put some links down in the description thingy of some of my favorite older pieces of furry content that I still think about today. That's all from me, everybody. Back to you, Renard. Thanks, Ike. Although a lot has changed in the furry community, I think some things have also kind of stayed the same. I think it's always been a really expressive and embracing community of people's differences and being creative together. It's generally also pretty much been very LGBT friendly from the get-go, and it's always been a great outlet for people who, you know, life is kind of hard a lot of the time, especially when you grow up, and it's amazing being able to just leave that world behind completely, become a new person, go to a place where people aren't going to judge you based on some pretense of if you're insecure about how you look, or maybe about how you act in front of people, or if you just want to free yourself from yourself for some time. There's so many opportunities for kindness in the furry community and ways to make people smile, make their days better, and that's one of my favorite things. Even though I'm not as active in it every day as some other people are, it's something that will always be a part of me and something that I'll always be really thankful for having been in my life. If you want more information on the history overall of the furry fandom, you can check out Ash Coyote's amazing documentary that she came out with last year. It's awesome. Special thanks again to Ike for giving us some details on the furry fandom from back then. I have been Renner Fox. Thank you very much for watching. Bye! Do do do. Ba do 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 do. Okay.